All right, hello. So this is an overview of the annotated bibliography, which is your other supplemental assignment. So while your proposal is something that's going before you start your paper, the annotated bibliography is something that you should be working on with your paper. It's essentially a way to make sure your research is working properly and that you understand your research and you know how to integrate it in. So for your annotated bibliography, your other supplemental assignments, essentially you're going to be writing one paragraph for a minimum of 8 sources, because again, 8 is your required source for your argument paper, so it makes sense that your annotated bibliography is going to require 8 paragraphs as well. So again, you can do your APA or MLA format, Times New Roman, 12-point fonts, that all stays the same. In fact, this formatting is going to be the same as your works cited. So you can include this all in one file when you submit, or you can break it up into 2 parts if you want on Blackboard when you submit these. They're going to be due the same day. So essentially you just take your works cited or references page and you're just going to be adding a paragraph to each citation. That's what you're doing. So again, the reason being the annotated bibliography, way to review your sources to make sure they're consistent, relevant, and comprehensive. So there are 3 parts to an annotated bibliography: the summary, the analysis, and the reflection. So a lot of people think that the annotated bibliography is just a summary of your source. That's only a small portion. So an average annotation is 100 to 200 words. Some will be longer, some will be shorter. As long as your average is in that 100-word count collectively for all 8 of your sources, you're good. So like maybe you have one that's 90 words, maybe you have one that's 150, one that's 100 on the dot, one 120, 195. As long as you're around that 100-word, you're good. Right? That's what I'm looking for within your sources. And again, the length will be relative to what you get out of these sources. So the easiest way to make sure you get your page length or your word length in your paragraphs is to follow this structure with the summary, analysis, and reflection. So when you do your summary, 1 to 2 sentences. What is the basic overview? Make sure you're using your signal phrase when you transition into this. Main points, conclusions that they reach. Who's the intent? What's the motive intent for this piece, right? So by now you should really know the summary element, right? That's not too difficult. It gets a little harder when you go to the analysis or the analyzing step, because you're looking at things that are about the way it's written or why it's written. So again, you still want another 1 to 2 sentences. So you're looking for things like, is there anything unique in the formatting, how it's written, how it's structured? Is there any specific credibility of the author that makes this a more reliable source? Why we want to use this as a source? Readability. How well is it written? How well can I read it? Does that indicate a certain audience? Who is the audience for this piece? Is there any bias? Because again, some of your sources are going to be your opposition sources, or maybe this is a really good source that supports your point, but they are biased, and acknowledging that in annotation will help you understand how to acknowledge that or how to work around any possible biases when you use that source in your paper. Tone, what does it sound like? What's the quality of the information? How are they using their methodology? You've been thinking about how you were doing yours in your proposal. Can you find theirs and analyze it? And if you really need help on this analysis, something I recommend is a CRAP test. Maybe some of you were introduced to this in English 100 classes, your basic composition courses, and it's a really good tool, particularly I think for the annotated bibliographies. So if you Google CRAP test, a few things will come up, particularly under images, things that look like this. I think this is a nice breakdown of what those are. But if you do the CRAP test worksheet, that I think is more helpful, because it forces you to actually ask the question specifically about the source that you have. You can also divvy up points and score it in each section. You know, maybe it's more current than it is relevant. maybe it's accurate, but the authority is not so great. And so you can give each of those a quantitative number, and it recommends based on how you score it, how well the source works for you, how strong a source it is. And again, things that these questions pose in the worksheet can be helpful in developing your analysis, making it strong. So just something that might be a useful tool for you, or recommendation, but not required. Then there's the reflect or reflection. Again, another 1 to 2 sentences. This is where you're telling me how you're going to use this source. So this goes back a little bit to your proposal, right? You can use the I want the I want to know what you plan to do. What purpose does this source serve? And the real thing here is making sure every source serves a different purpose. If you notice that you keep saying the same thing in your reflection for 3 or 4 of your sources, maybe you only need one of those. Or maybe you're not hitting another perspective. Maybe you realize that, oh, none of these are opposition. Why haven't I included my counter yet? All of these are going to be used in favor of my position. Or, hey, I'm using a lot of data in these. Where's my anecdotal evidence? Where's my qualitative data? So it gives you a chance to look at the quality of your source and the purpose of your source, is the point of these annotated bibliographies. So how it relates to be used in your paper, how it changed your perspective, maybe. I'm more interested in this bit. That's really the part of the reflection I want, but I've seen versions with things like that. So, all right, let's look at examples, right? So same thing, we're gonna look at some highlighted ones. I didn't do the whole highlight, just again, the start, so you can see where they stop and start. So Kitty McDonough, trigger warnings, what things are missing. So this is an old example from a class that we did. So again, you're formatting here. Just keep your same format. This one is in 7th edition MLA, and so that's why it's got the web. That's old school. But your hanging indent actually continues with your annotation, if you'll see that here. So it literally is just a continuation of your citation, this paragraph that you're adding, which is why it's part of the hanging indent. So I don't need to repeat much of my citation information. I'm just going to go with my last name like it's in my paper signal phrase. McDonough proposes that trigger warnings are sometimes necessary and provides a counter to Jarvie's argument. Okay. Summary. That's what it's about, right? That's the main point of conclusion. Then we have the analysis. Rather than resort to ad hominem attacks, she directly quotes Jarvie and offers rebuttals. McDonough appears balanced in her stance because she concedes to some of Jarvie's points. So I'm looking at her structure, right? How it's written, readability, things like that, the tone, and her credibility, and the fact that she does have balance to these things, right? So that's making her a reliable source for me. Then I have my reflection. How do I want to use her? In turn, having her as my opposition allows me to present a non-biased counter-argument to supporters of trigger warnings and acknowledge where common ground lies. Notice that this is specific. This is not, this source will support my thesis. Ding, 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 all of your sources should support your thesis. In what way? Which specific point? Through what methodology? Right? That's what we're looking for here. Again, your reflection should not sound the same for all of your sources. Otherwise, you don't need them all to do the same job. So let's look at another one. So Ginny Jarvie, this is one that we did read in class. So here, again, this one's more 8th edition MLA. That's why there would be a URL there instead. So here, again, signal phrase, last name. Jarvie argues against the use of trigger warnings on college campuses because the concepts of triggers are so wide and varied it is impossible to implement them effectively without being excessive. So this one's a little more detailed in the summary. I like that better. It's a little stronger in what her main idea is, position, particularly the why. While Jarvie's tone is highly sarcastic, she does provide numerous examples from colleges across the country to show the increase in overuse of trigger warnings. So again, here I note her tone, but I also note her writing style, her use of exemplification. That's useful. That adds depth to her writing. And then here, Jarvie will be an opposing force in my paper. I will rebut her idea that trigger warnings are unnecessary by pairing her with Johnston to show their actual use versus perception. So again, I'm specific on what point I'm gonna make with her, right? So again, there's a few more examples here. They're highlighted, and you can find these on Blackboard. There's a section on the annotation format, which is this first section I covered. And then there's a section on format with examples that includes these that are highlighted to give you a little bit of a guide. But if you're interested, under samples, so the others are under content. Under samples, I have a couple more that aren't highlighted. So another English Johnston one and a Tau Fortgang one. And these would be really helpful to look at to see if can you identify, the same way we did the proposal, where the summary is, where the analysis is, where the reflection is. And hopefully you can do that. And you'll notice the links on some of these are very close to, oops. If we count here, oh, tools, word count, here we go. So 129 on that one. Some of the other ones we read, you know, if we look at this Johnston one that's highlighted, 113. So again, if you're writing 2 sentences for each of those 3 parts, you are going to get your 100 words for each one, right? The other thing I want to point out here is when you do your own annotations, you have to do 8, but some of you are going to have more sources than just 8. If you do an annotation for all of your sources past 8, I will grade based on the best 8, right? So if you give me 10, I will cut the 2 weakest ones and grade like they don't exist, as opposed to them maybe pulling you down slightly. So there may be a point or 2 benefit in going ahead and doing annotations for all of the sources that you have for your argument paper when you get to it. The other thing, again, I just want to remind you, don't wait to do your annotations until you're done with your paper. If anything, they should be a bridge between your proposal and your paper that you're working on. Because for your proposal, you should have compiled, you know, these 2, hopefully 4, maybe all 8 of your sources. Go ahead and start working on your annotations. Do a rough version of them, and you can, again, develop more of your plans for your paper. Know what points you need to hit. And you can also, just like your proposal, reuse a little material from your annotations. Maybe you really like a summary you did for one of your annotations. Well, you can reuse that to introduce the source in the paper. I'm okay with that. So again, there's just some notes here on that of, you know, what your formatting style, some little tidbits that should help. So again, those are the 3 parts. If you follow this formula, you're good. You're good. And again, I do have all these examples. I'm not going to read all of them, but I just want to show you what they look like so you know what you're looking for on Blackboard under content or under samples. So annotations format with examples, or under samples, annotation examples. So there's a few different places they're at so that you can have a variety of them. And so you can have the ones that are highlighted for you, but also, again, that you can have some to practice with to see if you know where you would highlight them, the same way that we did with the proposal. So for that, normally in class we would do practice ones with group work, which is how I have these examples in the first place, but obviously that's much harder to do. So really we're going to be using this to go into your workshop pretty quickly. And for the workshop, I'm just going to be looking for 2 of your annotations, because once you have the pattern down, the format, it's easy to replicate. So really, if you get a little review on 2 of your sources, annotations, I think you'll have a good idea of where the rest should go without much problem. That'll be what we do for this week with the annotations. Looking at posting those 2 annotations on Wednesday, finishing the workshop by Friday. So that's our week. Hopefully you're watching this video on a Monday, at the very least, but I'm going to be posting it a little earlier. So, okay, I think that is the whole shebang. Okay, so I'll see what you do in workshop.